What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Del Rey. That's right, no pithy intro today, no anything really. In fact, I do apologize if I sound a little off. I've been bugged by whatever allergies or whatever is going on. My throat's been very off all day today, so if I do sound a little odd, I do apologize. But today we're here just to talk through UDFA talk, profiles on the remaining UDFAs that we have not yet addressed through the video earlier this week. Now, in addition to that, there's also little things because of press conferences that the Packers held today by brand new quarterback 1, Jordan Love, as well as RB 1, Aaron Jones, and defensive tackle 1, Kenny Clark. So just some super quick thoughts and observations about those press conferences. First, Jordan Love, quarterback. Yeah, the new guy. QB1, he's poised now. Now, Jordan Love, throughout all of his interviews, throughout all of his time with the Packers, has always been a guy who's been a little bit more soft-spoken, a little bit more contemplative, doesn't completely open to the media. And you kind of saw that yet today, but the tone began to be different. This is a guy who really began to sound like the franchise's quarterback. He constantly referred back to his confidence and knowing that there are going to be ups and downs in his first year as a starter. But what is going to push him through will be his own self of confidence. He also talked about how important team building is. The fact that the more you build the friendship, the togetherness on the roster, the more you are going to be able to endure those inevitable ups and downs coming throughout the course of the season. And that was my big takeaway from watching him talk today, was this doesn't sound like necessarily a young man who just got drafted, who doesn't quite know what's going on. This sounded like a guy who's ready to take on more. And while, I'm going to throw in there too, while being honest. You know, he was asked about whether it was frustrating to be a first-round pick and then have to sit behind Aaron Rodgers for 3 freaking years. He basically said, yeah, at times it was really hard. You know, he knew when he was drafted that the deal was he was going to be sitting for a while. It's Aaron Rodgers. But then when that contract extension was signed last offseason, that's when it got fairly dark. And he admitted that. I found his press conference to be very honest, very engaging without being showy. This is a guy who just knows that he's quarterback 1. He knows it's his job now, and he knows, or he believes, that he can do it. Bouncing off that, Kenny Clark, the big notable from Kenny Clark's press conference, of course, even the defensive tackle was asked a litany of questions about Aaron Rodgers, but the one that I found most interesting was the fact that he was repeatedly asked, how is it different this year? A lot of old dudes are gone. You're one of the old dudes now at the ripe old age of 27. You know, what does it feel like now? And Kenny Clark basically said, it's different, but there's a lot of hungry guys in this locker room. The fact that, you know, everyone's in it together, lots of hunger. He did say that he is expecting Slayton and Wyatt to take big steps forward this year as they ascend into starting roles in the defense. He did talk about how overjoyed he was that Joe Barry was retained as the defensive coordinator, even admitting that they did make a number of defensive changes throughout the course of the year last year to get more aggressive, make things simpler. But nonetheless, he was happy that Joe Barry keeps the defensive coordinator job. But the thing I kept coming back to was the fact that he was talking about this being a young, hungry, energetic group in practices and workouts thus far. I think that's really important. And, you know, not to make a mountain out of a molehill, but quite possibly something different than what we've seen in the last couple of years. And then the last one, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, Showtime. You want to talk about the epitome of good human, good teammate. Look no further than Aaron Jones, and it's clear as day that number 33 does believe in Jordan Love. And when he was asked about, hey, when Jordan Love goes through those dark times, what do you do? And he said, basically just be the guy I've always been, help him see things that maybe he's not seeing, remind him that we're all in this together. The epitome of a Packer person is Aaron Jones. Now, let's get to these UDFAs, right? Now, the vast majority of these are guys that were actually signed as UDFAs immediately following the draft. 2 of them were these rookie minicamp tryouts that then eventually became signings onto the offseason roster. I am electing not to include Christian Morgan, the safety from Baylor. And the reason from that, I talked about it a little bit on Monday, is Christian Morgan was originally reported as a Packer undrafted free agent signing. And then he didn't actually appear on the Packers roster. And then he didn't actually show up at minicamp. So not sure what's going on there. I elected not to include him since the Packers aren't including him on their roster. Even when you do a Google search now for Christian Morgan, it's not really tied to the Packers much anymore. There's no kind of news article about it or anything. So, just things to consider. Doesn't look like he is a Green Bay Packer. So who are we talking about today? We're talking about Duece Watts, the wide receiver. Henry Pearson, the fullback and tight end from Appalachian State. Chuck Filiaga, the guard from Minnesota. Keyshawn Banks, the outside linebacker from San Diego State. Brenton Cox Jr., the outside linebacker from Florida. Antonio Moultrie, the defensive lineman from Miami. And then long snapper. We're not doing a full profile on a long snapper. You're not going to get me. Long snapper Brenton Hatcher from Old Dominion. So let's start at the top. We're just going to move in position order here. Wide receiver from Tulane, Duece Watts. The man is 6'1", 196 pounds. His RAS score was 7 even. It mostly was brought down because he didn't exactly have the best agility scores. The rest of his RAS looked pretty great. Agility, not so much. So here's the good that I was able to find about him. He has a very large catch radius. He uses his frame well. He flashes the body type and receiving skills of a NFL wide receiver. The bad. He hasn't exactly been throwing the ball a lot at Tulane. He had his most targets his first year. And there's really not a lot of college production to speak of. His average targets per year is about 50. His average catches per year is about 27. And that's kind of a lot of the scouting reports of him. It's at times he's got this huge catch radius and a very strong physical profile. Where's the rest of the catches? Where's the rest of anything for Tulane? So certainly something to keep in mind. He appears to be a wide receiver who flashes that ability, who has that frame. Well, not the most speed in the world, but there's questions remaining as to why he just wasn't more productive for Tulane. Next up, I want to talk about Henry Pearson, a very interesting one, tight end from Appalachian State, who the Packers list on their roster as a fullback, which of course makes the projection a little bit odd. But he's 6'2", 249 pounds. He has a 5.17 RAS as a tight end. The man did 30 bench reps. Lucas Van Ness may lose the title of Hercules because Henry Pearson, while maybe not looking the part like Lucas Van Ness, he doesn't have that Greek god look. The man benched 30 reps. So, that's higher than anyone else they're going to talk about today. That's higher than most defensive linemen, most offensive linemen, and the dude's a tight end or fullback or whatever they're going to make him. And I said, it's difficult to know the exact projection here for Pearson, right? Because why are you going to talk about tight end skills as a fullback? Sure, some things mirror each other, but not exactly all of them. But here is what you can know. By all accounts at Appalachian State, he was a quality receiver. No, he wasn't the most productive. His career high was this last season with 25 catches, 329 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And he, by all accounts, is an adept blocker. Over all 5 of his years, over 70% of his snaps every single year, average, I should say. His lows were kind of in the low 60s, but average was around 70% of all of his offensive snaps were blocking, be them pass or run blocking, of course. So what do the Packers have here? My guess would be that they're bringing in a guy to compete for kind of an H-back role or perhaps even a special teams role. Maybe just be a training camp body to fill in for lower down on the depth chart behind DeGuara, etc., etc. But to list him as a fullback when he obviously has 5 years of experience at tight end leads me to believe that this is going to be a player that they want to slide into the H-back role. Even though for DeGuara, who currently habitates that role, has never been changed to a fullback officially. So, going to be very interesting to see what they do with Henry Pearson. Going to be very interesting to see if this is anything more than just a body in training camp. Because, let's be frank, some of these guys were signed with the purpose of just being bodies, right? And of course, they're going to get a fair shot from the Packers. But at the end of the day, we see this every year. There's 90 Packers when training camp starts. Then there becomes just a little over half of that when the season starts. Some of these guys are brought in exclusively, like quarterbacks is kind of the classic example, right? Sometimes into training camp, you may bring 4 quarterbacks, so you're only carrying 2 on your roster. Part of that may just be because you don't want to burn your starter's arm from throwing to the 15 receivers that you got. So they bring in more quarterbacks to habitate these roster spots. And so Henry Pearson is going to be a very, very interesting question. What do they actually expect from him? Next will be Chuck Filiaga, the guard from Minnesota. 6'5", 321 pounds, 7.89 RAS. He spent 4 years at Michigan before transferring this last year to Minnesota, when he truly did have his most productive, highest graded year as a collegiate offensive lineman. He had 736 snaps last year, and as I said, he had his highest grade, 74.6 overall offensively from PFF, 73 in the run blocking department, 73.5 in the pass blocking department. He also had 98.3% efficiency last year, and only 2 sacks allowed over his entire collegiate career combined. But what's the bad? Look, he's a big dude, 6'5", 321 pounds. He's a big man. But he's not exactly a mobile man. In fact, almost every scouting report seems to universally identify one of his issues as having very little bend. And I thought maybe Pro Football Network actually said it best when they said, wide-bodied blocker who is only effective in a small area. What that says to me is, if you come into his zone and he gets your hands on you, you're done. But he does not have a big zone. He doesn't have a lot of reach. He might get out leveraged if you're a little guy. And if you can get away from him, he's not catching up. So next to be outside linebacker Keyshawn Banks from San Diego State. Admittedly, one of the tougher prospects on this list to find a wealth of information from, despite him also having 5 years of collegiate career to fall back on. He's 6'3", 251 pounds. He has a 2.09 RAS, but that's very incomplete because I could not find any speed data, or at least a complete picture of it. The good, he had 8 sacks and 85 pressures over the last 2 years combined. But the bad, scouting reports seems wildly mixed on him. I mean, I'm talking like all the different sites that I searched. There's, first of all, very difficult to find not only a ton of info about this guy, but certainly to find a consensus. Some believed that he was better off as a defensive lineman. Some believed that he's better off as an edge. And there seem to be drawbacks to both arguments per all these reports. If he's going to be a defensive lineman, the dude's got to bulk up. If he's going to be an edge or linebacker, he really has to diversify his skill set, including in pass rush moves, as well as lateral quickness and for coverage. I even found discrepancies about whether he has a high motor or not. So, was he productive over the last couple of years collegiately for San Diego State? Yes, he was. But what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? No one seems to know for sure. So, something to keep an eye on. Next, outside linebacker. This one's a little bit more of an open and shut case. Everyone seems to know what he's good at, bad at. Brenton Cox Jr. from Florida. Yes, perhaps the most written about UDFA signing for the Green Bay Packers. A lot of people thought that this person had the ability to be a draft pick, but wound up not being for a fairly good reason. So let's just get through the specs first. He's 6'3", 250 pounds. He's got a 6.25 RAS as a defensive end. And that RAS is admittedly dragged down because it's as a defensive end, and 250 pounds is little for that. But so it's the good. As an edge, he's got an NFL-ready body. He's got explosive pass skills. I saw a few reports of him being a brute force attacker, and I really liked that wording. The fact that this is a guy who pass rushes with a level of violence, who pass rushes with force, and not necessarily finesse. So what's the bad? Well, speaking in terms of his game, he needs to learn a little bit of that more finesse and technique. That seems what seems to be lacking. I mean, even Dane Brugler, for his major draft guide, The Beast for The Athletic, said that he just needs to learn more of the position, needs to become more technically fluent, as opposed to just being a monstrous athlete with explosive traits. Okay, but monstrous athletes with explosive traits, those guys get drafted all the time. And they need to learn the position? Boy, we talked about that a bunch during the draft. Why didn't he get drafted? Well, he seems to like things that aren't exactly legal in every state. For the University of Georgia, he originally went there for his collegiate career, but he was removed from the team after being cited for marijuana possession. Regardless of how you personally feel about that, it was at the time against both team rules, it was against the law, etc., gets you removed from the team. So then he went down to Florida. And he did have a couple of successful years in Florida, especially one of the midpoints of his collegiate career. It was statistically his best season, including over 8.5 sacks. I think it was 14.5 tackles for loss. But where did it all go bad? Well, this last year at Florida, he was let go from the team again. And when pressed why, the coach for Florida said it was for an accumulation of reasons. Now, I don't know what that means. I'm not sure anyone really knows what that means, beyond maybe just the people involved in the situation and now maybe the security guys for the Green Bay Packers. But is this attitude problems? Is it more drug problems, if you'd like to call them that? Are there other concerns? Nonetheless, for an undrafted free agent, if you like his physical traits, these are the types of guys you might take a lottery ticket on, right? But nonetheless, this is a pretty valid concern. After all, what got him kicked off of Georgia is still illegal in the state of Wisconsin. So could be problematic if he continues in with that extracurricular. Basically, at the end of the day, the Green Bay Packers had to have some kind of comfort level to bring in the athletic specimen that is Brenton Cox Jr. from Florida. They had to, right? Or else they're not going to bring him in, especially given how conscious they are about the character of the players that they bring in. And one thing that I will say is, from some things that I found, it looked as though even though he was removed from the program, Brenton Cox somehow maintained in relatively decent standing with Florida, even participating in their pro day. And when he was picked up by the Packers, the Florida Twitter account put out a congratulations to Brenton Cox. So, I mean, he obviously had to stay in some kind of good standing. I don't know. Might be a mystery for another day. Our last pure prospect of the day would be defensive lineman Antonio Moultrie. Yes, last pure prospect of the day. I'm not talking Broughton Hatcher from long snapper from Old Dominion. So Antonio Moultrie from Miami, 6'3", 275 pounds, 5.24 RAS. He spent 4 years at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, before this last year moving to Miami. The goods? He's flashed a lot of NFL traits, including pad level, leverage, just overall technique of playing the position. But it's only been flashes. And despite spending 4 years at UAB, when he did transfer to Miami, he only played 159 defensive snaps. So it's not like he transferred to Miami and then all of a sudden became like this full-fledged bona fide starter. No, he transferred to Miami and then he's kind of sort of part of their rotation. And even there, you saw flashes. You didn't see this consistent basis of like, that's an NFL player. Now, again, we're talking UDFAs. So that's okay. As a UDFA, you just want to take those traits and make them consistent. And then you might have an NFL player on your hands. But realistically, at 275 pounds, as he's been listed most frequently from what I could find, he probably will have to bulk up a little bit in order to survive in a 3-4 defensive line. Not a ton, but a bit. So, Anthony Moultrie, a man of flashes, but not consistency yet. So there you have it, the UDFAs of the Green Bay Packers. Now, on Friday, I'm going to be talking about the way too early 53-man roster prediction, just to have some fun. In addition to that, tomorrow night, unfortunately, my family schedule is not really going to allow me to go live, but tomorrow night with the NFL schedule release, I will put something out. Yes, the NFL schedule release is coming out 7 Central, tomorrow night being Thursday night, so I'll put a video out late Thursday night. And then I'll have my customary late Friday afternoon video for the 53-man roster. And then the schedule, as I said, might be tweaking a little bit next week because I might have something kind of sort of exciting to announce. So thanks for checking out Lombardi Time Brews today. Thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with my sounds odd and maybe strained voice. But thanks for being here today. Hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday. Hope you're having a great week. I'll be back tomorrow night. Remember, late night video tomorrow night if you'd like to check that out about the schedule release. Thanks so much for being here, and as always, go Pack Go.